Thank you, Helen. Thank you to everyone here today for coming out. It's a really difficult time of year. It's a time of year where we're supposed to celebrate giving and goodwill and kindness to all, except towards animals. They're the ones who are exempt from our generosity, from our grace and our kindness. We are so fundamentally brainwashed into thinking that animal consumption is natural, normal and necessary, that even at Christmas time, even at a time when we're supposed to be generous of spirit and kind of heart, we cannot even extend the same compassion to animals. And for many of us here, we sit down at the Christmas table knowing that there isn't food in front of us, but instead body parts. It's not so much a Christmas lunch or dinner as it is a Christmas gravesite. And yet, for animal activists, we're often the ones who are maligned and mocked and ridiculed because we're the weirdos, we're the freaks. We want this weird thing called a vegan world. And fundamentally, what we want is the same thing that everybody wants. We want a better world for everyone. And we no longer have to make a decision between ethics and health or ethics and the environment, because what's good for one is good for us all. It doesn't matter how well animals are treated. It doesn't matter how much kindness they're shown during their life. If at the end of it all, if we take their lives from them, it is exploitation. We cannot take an animal's life in any respect, and least of all in the spirit of Christmas, in the spirit of giving. So the irony is that in about 10, 11 days time, many of us will be sitting down to a Christmas meal consisting of animal parts, and we'll be patting ourselves on the back and calling ourselves kind, gracious, giving, except for the animals. And then the next day, we'll be lining up here. We'll be lining up here for the post-Christmas consumerist sales, where there'll be more waste, more discarded. One day, we spend one day being grateful and generous and kind, and we spend the next day trampling one another in our greed, in our desire to possess, which in many ways is exactly how we treat animals. We don't treat them as beings. We don't treat them as beings, we treat them as objects, as commodities. And the funny thing is, well, not funny, the ironic thing is that for most people who are not vegan, you know exactly what it feels like to be vegan. If you ever hear about the Yulin Dog Eating Festival, the Dog Meat Festival, if you ever hear about some of the practices of slaughter around the world, and if you hear about dogs and cats being eaten, being beaten and killed for their flesh, if you hear about whales and dolphins being pulled from their natural habitat, and if any part of you shows some disgust or sympathy or empathy about these practices, you know what it's like to be vegan, because the way you feel about dogs and cats is exactly the way we feel about turkeys and chickens and pigs and cows and sheep and fish. Bottom line is we all want the same thing. We all have the same needs. I'm a psychologist, so we have the same physical needs, but we also have the same psychological needs. And what creates the division between vegans and non-vegans is this idea that we want something different. And we actually all want the same thing. We all want a better world. We want a better future. We want to be in the best health that we can be. We want to leave a planet that's viable for the future generations. We don't even have one generation left, not even one generation left before our climate collapses. We've got about a decade, maybe 15 years. What happens every 4 years or so is a generation is born. That's the generation that's going to change the world. That generation is the millennials. It's the Gen Zs, it's the Gen Alphas. We've got all three of those generations represented here, because We don't have time to wait for 4 cycles of generations for change to happen. The change has to happen now. So the people who are millennials now, the people who are Gen Alphas now, the Gen Zs now, we've got them in the front here. They're the ones who are leading the way, and they may be young now, but they're going to lead the charge towards a better future. Animal exploitation is a barbaric, outdated practice. It was something that was necessary at a time when we didn't have the abundance of food that we have available now. It was a necessity when we were literally, the decision was literally life or death, starvation or eating whatever we could find. And we don't have that situation now. Every decision to be vegan, can be made at every meal. That's all it is. It's just a decision. Where there is a choice to be had, the decision can be made. That's the definition of veganism, where possible or practicable. Where there is choice, the choice is always kindness. So I'm going to close by saying to my fellow animal activists who so bravely stand here today, you put yourselves in the firing line of such of hostility and bickering, heckling we've heard today, and you are actually showing others what it means to live according to your principles, what it means to do what's right instead of what's popular. You're giving the world such an important gift, because not only are you saving animals, but you're showing others how to stand true to your principles. And no matter how much you are bullied or harassed or mocked, you will stand firm and you'll stand by what you believe in. No compromise. Because that's what this world needs in order to heal itself. To my fellow activists, and especially if this is your first activist event, please make this the first of many. Because if there's one thing that can make a difference this time of year, it's having even just one friend, one like-minded individual who gets you. We all need to feel accepted and understood. And amongst our family and friends, where we're so often not accepted and not understood, even having one other person around you who can share in your difficulties and share in your disappointments, it can make all the difference. So please let this be the first of many if this is your first activist event. Please remember to conserve your emotional energy, not for the inflammatory discussions where people are just interested in wearing you down, but for the genuine conversations where people are interested in listening and learning. Because at the end of the day, veganism, ending animal exploitation, is what's good for all of us. And our mere presence, even just our presence in the room, helps remind people of what's possible. So this time of year, maybe it's our presence that can actually be the greatest present. Thank you so much.